Let's talk about the money factor.
Yes, it's a very big one, actually. What's really interesting in terms of compensation is, in particular, we can talk about the absolutes about levels of compensation, but as far as employee satisfaction or engagement goes, it's really around perception, right, of compensation. Do I feel like I'm well paid or fairly paid? Do I feel like I'm getting the level of benefits that would be commensurate with the kind of industry I'm in?
So how do they feel in Vietnam?
Not so good. And this could be as much a matter of communication of compensation and benefits, and an issue around that as it is about the absolute level of
So it's not very much about value, it's about the communication, the perception that you create for the employees.
I think that could be a fairly large piece of it. But the second piece is the absolute, and that sort of leads into the other topic about the escalation in compensation in Vietnam.
So you've seen an increase of salary in Vietnam?
Absolutely, and we have some data on that if we want to look at that. In fact, it's actually the highest in Asia.
The highest
in
Asia?
In Asia.
What's the
correct.
percentage, can I ask?
Well, our data shows that for 2010 was running just under 13%, and looking at 2011 also running at about that level. And predictions for 2012 are not far off that as well. So even when we compare it to so-called hot markets like India and China, it's still significantly above those markets.
So it's about 13 to 15% per year.
That's correct.
Increase.
That's correct.
Wow, that's a big number, isn't it?
That's a big number.
But then if you look at inflation in Vietnam, that's probably not a big increase, is it?
That's correct, because inflation in Vietnam is also one of the highest in Asia. So employers also, what tends to drive salary increases in addition to things like inflation are things like supply in the market, the price.
So have you seen this increase? You've seen this increase across functions, but which are the highest in the market at the moment?
The ones that we're seeing as highest and actually above 14% really fall in the middle management and
the middle management track
areas. So those are the ones where we're seeing the highest level of salary increases, both current and what is being projected for 2012.
Have you seen differences as well in different positions or different professions across the market?
We do see it in different industries in particular. So, and that can go up and down a little bit. It's a little bit cyclical depending on industries. In general, chemicals, fast-moving consumer goods, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, all looking...
The key industries of growth in Vietnam.
Exactly.
Yeah, no surprise.
Actually, over the last few years, what we've seen, if we dig down into the data, is that the perception of pay against the external market, am I fairly paid against the external market, is actually... the perception is a little more positive than it is about, am I fairly paid against my colleagues? And you may wonder why. Well, what's happening is if I stay with my company, I'm getting my salary increases, but meanwhile, my company is buying people from the market. And so I'm getting a colleague that's coming in to do the same work that I am doing, but probably my company's had to pay more to get that person from the market because of that escalation.
Is that the perception or is that reality?
I believe that's probably a certain amount of reality as well. Because in order to avoid that trap, and to some extent there's no escaping if we want to get that talent, but to avoid that trap, it really takes a strong talent management, development, and compensation program. And that takes very, very solid HR practices to develop.
Yeah, I totally believe you on that because I think Vietnamese employees, they do talk to each other about the salary.
Yes.
So you can't really make it a secret.
Exactly. We see that people seem to know what other people are making very, very closely. And I think that's where you see this issue of less satisfaction with the internal equity, as we would call it. Because I'm speaking to you and I'm thinking, why is she making more than I am? I make at least as much of a contribution as she does. And so this causes a certain amount of angst. Yeah.
So with that increase in salary on an annual basis at such a high rate, Is that causing a lot of difficulties for MNC's headquarters to plan their HR strategy for Vietnam?
I think it does. There's a couple of things that happen. First, if your MNC, if your headquarters of your MNC is in a country which has experienced is in a less dynamic part of the world for economic growth, in those markets, salary increases have been down in the 2 to 3% sort of levels. The headquarters companies that are dealing with employees there really are not experiencing the same sort of war for talent. So in that context, the headquarters management has difficulty comprehending that it's a whole different world in many parts of Asia and very much a different world in Vietnam with this huge and dynamic struggle to get the qualified resources and the extensive salary escalation that's going on.
I've also seen a lot of senior managers from MNCs moving to local companies.
Yes.
Because the local companies are on the rise at the moment, the medium and big ones.
That is correct.
And that's a challenge for HR strategy as well in Vietnam, is it?
It very much is so. And I think that many foreign multinationals sometimes feel a little bit bitter about that. They think, we brought these people in, we trained them on all our processes and systems, and then off they go to a local, emerging, high flyer company.
But why are they moving to local companies?
The value proposition. I come back to that. I'm going to join a company that is headquartered here, and I am going to be at the headquarters. So I will have influence over the direction of this company. Local companies also, in terms of that aspect of ownership, allowing a certain level of ownership or long-term sort of incentive programs or buy-in, are in a position to offer those. Whereas many global multinationals tend to stick for their executives to global type of programs, and so perhaps don't have the flexibility to do something a little bit different.
Have you actually seen any companies here, foreign companies here in Vietnam, having any solutions around that? So offering a lot more of exposure to their employees.
We see some of the foreign multinationals that have been successful at retaining some of these highly regarded and highly sought people, is they have people who they're going to put on international assignment and rotational programs, people who are interested in working for a global company and want to travel, those sorts of things. We see that they're focusing on.
So the value proposition that you're talking about has to engage all the factors that we've been discussing.
That's correct.
Plus the exposure or the entrepreneurship that you mentioned on the show as well.
Exactly. And for example, we see some of the foreign multinationals experimenting with putting in R&D units or other sort of units that tend to have a little more of a, call it an entrepreneurial focus, to establish those in Asian countries such as Vietnam. Let me put a group there, and they're there developing products or doing whatever, and that certainly gives it a little more of that flavor of I'm working for a startup or for a.
So engaging the local Vietnamese employees in the group as well, the regional groups, so that they can feel that they are part of something bigger.
That as well. I think that's an important aspect. It's feeling part of a global community, but also feeling that locally we can be developing something. And we've seen many examples of that over the last little while as companies realize that, in effect, they're not making very good use of their talent, their full capability that they have in an organization if they've decided that they're going to have all the ideas back at headquarters and just export them.
So the total value proposition, let's put it in a package and deliver it to the audience.
Exactly.
What would be the package and what's inside the package? Can you just do a summarize of that?
It's easy to say, well, here are the things that should be in my package, but it's very important to make sure that it's real and that it resonates with the brand, because one of the worst things you can do is to put out a value proposition that you're actually not living up to. So coming back to the sort of components, though, we would suggest that companies think about. Obviously, there's the basics, such as compensation, and benefits. But think creatively about that and how those pieces work together and what could differentiate you as an employer. I think the two broad other areas that companies need to think about is the whole picture of the work environment. And then there's the whole idea of development, career development and learning and development opportunities, which is really, really strong as far as a piece of the value proposition, assuming you can offer that.
Let me pick up on your development and training, because I
Yes.
think it's probably the key for HR planning in Vietnam because of the lack of skilled labor.
Right.
Is that something that's the big part of your HR budget in Vietnam?
It absolutely is. In fact, as we looked at the companies that were planning to increase their budgets this year, almost 2/3 of companies in Vietnam say that they will increase their HR budgets
They will
this year.
increase their HR budget.
Yes,
By
that's
what
correct.
percentage?
What we're seeing is the top reasons for the budget increase. Number one is training and development. So we see almost 62% of the organizations that we poll who say that they intend to make increases in their training and development.
Do you see training more in hard skills or soft skills in Vietnam?
We're seeing both, but a lot of emphasis on soft skills training. I think the recognition that some of these things are really important, the planning skills, the interpersonal skills, the communication skills, a lot of demand for that particular kind of training, in addition to specific technical training.
What about hiring and attraction? Is that something that's part of the budget as well for increase in budget?
Yes. But actually, if we look at the top two areas for driving increase in HR budgets based on our research, apart from training and development, the other one is actually introduction of a new benefits policy. New benefits policies, yeah. As organizations look and say, maybe there's something more we need to do there, and that there's more interest in that. And an opportunity, because it's still not an area that many employers in Vietnam have focused on. So when we come back to the value proposition and differentiating, still possibly an area that one can differentiate oneself.
So you will have to look at the needs of the local employees and see what sort of benefits you can add into the equation.
Exactly. And the ones that would be highly valued by the employees, what are those? And then building those into
It can be nothing related to money.
That's correct. That's correct.
So moving forward into 2011 and 12, would you see any challenges in hiring certain positions in Vietnam, so that the potential investors out there are aware of the situation?
Some of those critical technical skills, and then those middle management positions. And
It's the same.
It's the same ones. So what we would counsel is that employers think about their value proposition, certainly go after the kind of talent that they want, but also be prepared to, as we would call it, instead of buying from the market, build internally. That requires more effort in terms of training and development and management, but supervising, coaching, etc., but is probably worth it in the long run.
Okay, one last question before you go. I know you've got a busy schedule. If there is a new potential investor looking at Vietnam to set up their operations here, what would be your top advice to them in terms of their HR strategy and planning?
Okay, first you really do need to pay attention to the hygiene factors. You do need to understand the compensation and benefits landscape in Vietnam, because if you don't get that right, you're going to have an issue. But the second one then is to really think hard about what your value proposition is, and to the extent that it's real for you to focus on the areas that are important for Vietnamese employees.
The value proposition. We
That's
all
correct.
end up with the value proposition.
That's correct.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, for being on the show with us today.
Thank you.
Talent attraction, retention, and remuneration package, as discussed with our guest speaker today, are the three key issues and will remain key HR challenges for you in setting up and managing your businesses in Vietnam. Like any other emerging markets, Vietnam is one that requires market insights, a long-term vision, commitment, and certainly a flexible approach with much local adaptation in HR strategy and management. If you have questions for the show, please send them to faye@insidevietnam.com.vn. For past episodes and show updates, please visit Inside Vietnam on WordPress, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. My name is Faye Nguyen and I'm your host on Inside Vietnam. Allow me to end the show today with a bit of personal perspective on the subject. If you turn yourself into the source of love and energy, Vietnam should not be a challenge for you in HR management. Bye for now and see you again in 2 weeks.